Okay, before we define these services, what I need is what we want first is like we want to create some user, and that creating is kind of like registering user in the application, and that should be part of auth module, right? But since creating a user is actually something a part of user module, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to keep the method here, and I'm going to call this method from auth module service. All right, so I will define all the things here, but before that let's create a method for create user. All right, so what I'm gonna do, I'll just modify a few stuffs, I mean the name, and also make it more clear. So in async, what I'm gonna write, create user, and this create user is kind of we will be calling it from auth service, and on auth we'll be providing an endpoint to register, right? So let's write something that we can use to create user. So ideally what should happen is like we should get a create user DTO here, and this should be a type of create user DTO. Okay, and since now we'll be interacting with the database, so we'll need an instance of the database repository. So we'll create we'll get an instance of user repository. To do that, what we are going to do, we are going to define one variable, read only user repository, and then how we can provide the type of it. So we are going to use repository, and then we need to pass the entity here in angle bracket, and to inject like to map it with the instance of type ORM repository, which type ORM will internally create an instance. So if you remember, we mentioned here the feature inside the feature we provided user entity, right? So here what type ORM will do, will create an instance for the user repository, but in order to map it in the service, although here what we have done is just define the type, what will be the type of user repository, but till now we haven't um, mapped it with any injectable token. So what does it mean is like it won't be by default equal to the repository what type ORM defined. So in order to do that, what we can do, we can use one notation, inject repository, and then here we can pass the entity name. So what will happen when this instance of user service will be created, it will be automatically be assigned, I mean the user repository will be assigned to this variable. Okay, and now we can use this variable here in this file to do the database operations. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna create instance, I'm gonna save it in the database. So you generally, like when you save something in database, especially for the user, you need to detect whether this user exists in the database or not. So and then in that case what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna throw some error. So how we can do that? So let's do one thing, let's first find whether the user exists in our system or not. So we are going to do this dot find this dot user repository, and then we are going to do find find one. Okay, and this find one, what we can do is how we can do this. Okay, so since we have this create user d2, so we can add one condition. So whatever condition we want to add in find one, we'll have to add it in the where property. In where property, what we can do is we can provide the properties name, the column name. So here what we'll do is like we'll pass email, we'll verify it with the email. So here create user DTO dot email. Since why I'm adding a condition on email, the reason behind that, if you go back in entity, if I scroll down, I have marked it as unique. So usually we do verification on the unique fields. So the users are not allowed to do multiple registration with the same email ID. That's why I need to first verify whether any user exists with the same email ID. Now, if this will be true, okay, so if it returns something, it should return a user entity. But if it returns something, means there's a user exist in our system, and we don't want to create a new user again. So what we are going to do, so we are going to name it existing user. Okay, all right. And if there is an existing user, we can add a condition, and we can throw some error here, throw new bad request error, and we can add user already exists. Okay. Okay, sorry. Okay, I just want to do one thing before I proceed. Since we'll be needing it most of the time, like we'll be needing it to find user by email. It will be very common thing. So what I can do, I can create one method separately for the same. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna write a method here as saying find user by email, and I'll just copy and paste thing here. What I can do is I can just pass email ID here. So email will be string, and then I can just copy from here. Okay, and this should be email. I can remove this completely since the key and value are same, and yeah, this is fine. Find user by email. We can also write the type here, like what type it is returning, but I'm leaving it as it is for now, since we'll see later whether we need to return a response type from here or we need to return the entity type. So I'm just keeping it as it is now, since it is able to infer automatically. Okay, so since we have defined this method find user by email, I'm going to replace this line of code with our own defined method. So this will be create user d2 dot email. Okay, all right. So right now, since we haven't created any user in our system, what will happen is like this will not be able to find any user here. So in that case, what will happen is it will not go in this condition, and then if we try to console log and see what it is returning, existing user, and then if I try to add it existing user, we can see what it is returning, right? It should be null, undefined, or something like that. And there's one thing I wanted to do. Okay, so this create user, I haven't called it from anywhere. So what I can do right now is let's do. Okay, so now what we are going to do is we are going to create auth controller, and there we will be creating one register and login endpoint, and then we will be calling it from there only.